Friends, here is a report that every smoker in America...
Campsites and wherever else bugs like to breed and gather.
The 1950s was a time of poodle skirts, jukebox diners, and the golden age of American suburbia. Families gathered around their brand new television sets, kids zoomed down the street on bikes without helmets, and the milkman delivered fresh dairy right to your doorstep. But here's the shocking truth. Many things that were perfectly normal back then would land you in serious trouble today. So, join us as we dive into 25 things that were totally normal in the 1950s, but are completely illegal today. Imagine walking into a doctor's office in the 1950s, expecting medical advice, only to find your doctor casually puffing on a cigarette while checking your pulse. Sounds wild, right? But back then, smoking indoors was as normal as drinking coffee. People lit up in offices, restaurants, airplanes, and even hospitals. Yes, hospitals. While many people accepted this practice without question, there were some individuals and groups who began to voice concerns about the health risks associated with smoking.
People who do smoke will have a cigarette after they eat, and they would have to break that pattern.
Fast forward to today, and that same scenario would cause an uproar. We now know that secondhand smoke is a serious health hazard, leading to bans on indoor smoking in most public spaces across the U.S. and many other countries. So, while the 50s had their charm, it's safe to say we're breathing a lot easier these days. Picture this. It's the 1950s, and you're about to go for a drive in a big, shiny car with cushy seats and a roaring engine. You slide in, maybe light up a cigarette, because everyone did back then, and off you go, often without a seatbelt. While many cars were equipped with seatbelts, they were frequently optional, and most people simply ignored them.
Seatbelts are designed for adult bodies, when your child can sit with their back against the seat.
Back then, there was a general lack of awareness about the importance of seatbelts, with some believing they could just brace themselves in a crash. Crazy, right? It wasn't until the late 60s and 70s that people began to realize seatbelts actually saved lives, leading to laws that made them mandatory. Today, if you even think about driving without buckling up, you're asking for a ticket. Or, worse, a serious injury. Buckle up, folks. Back in the 1950s, drinking and driving was often seen as just another part of a night out. You could finish a few drinks at the local bar, hop into your car, and cruise home without much concern. While cops might pull you over if you were swerving excessively, many times they would simply advise you to be careful and send you on your way.
The limit.
People didn't think much about the risks until the accidents began to pile up. As time passed and the tragic consequences became impossible to ignore, attitudes shifted. Laws became tougher, and what was once more casually accepted turned into a serious crime. Today, getting caught driving under the influence means steep fines, license suspension, and even jail time. The message is loud and clear. Drinking and driving isn't just reckless, it's illegal and dangerous. During the 1950s, asbestos was hailed as the superhero of building materials, tough, fireproof, and ubiquitous. It was used in insulation, floor tiles, and ceiling panels, making homes and offices safer from fires. Builders loved it, and the potential risks of the tiny fibers were largely ignored.
Layer of asbestos. This is probably asbestos, honestly.
However, as research advanced, scientists connected the dots and discovered that this miracle material was a silent killer. Breathing in asbestos dust could lead to serious lung diseases, including cancer. By the time the dangers were widely recognized, asbestos was already in millions of buildings. Today, it is banned or strictly regulated in many countries, and renovations often require workers in hazmat suits to remove it safely. Imagine it's the 1950s, and you're painting your living room a beautiful shade of blue. The color is bold, the finish is smooth, and you feel like a home decor expert. But here's the catch. Your paint is packed with lead, and the dangers of that are not fully understood yet. Back then, lead-based paint was the go-to choice because it was super durable and had a rich, vibrant color that lasted for years.
Yeah, I mean, You know, you could probably, this is plaster as well, so you could still patch that.
People loved it. The problem? It was slowly poisoning families, especially children who, let's be honest, put their hands and sometimes their mouths on everything. Fast forward to today, and lead-based paint is banned in residential properties in many countries. If you buy an older home, you might have to bring in specialists to safely remove or seal any lingering toxic paint before it causes serious health issues. Back in the 1950s, passing a note or whispering during class could lead to a sharp whack on the knuckles with a wooden ruler. If you really pushed your luck, you might be sent to the principal's office for harsher punishment, sometimes involving a wooden paddle. Many teachers and principals had no qualms about using physical discipline to maintain order. Fast forward to today, and the approach has changed dramatically. In most places, hitting students is not only frowned upon but also illegal. Schools now emphasize discipline methods like detention, counseling, and positive reinforcement, aiming to teach better behavior rather than instill fear. This evolution reflects a deeper understanding of child development and effective teaching practices. Imagine stepping into a restaurant in the 1950s. You'd be greeted by the mouth-watering aroma of sizzling steaks and a thick cloud of cigarette smoke. People lit up everywhere, at the dinner table, in movie theaters, and even on airplanes. Yep, you could be flying thousands of feet in the air while the passenger next to you puffed away, filling the cabin with smoke.
The proposals voted down today would have stopped all smoking on short flights like this one.
Smoking was often seen as stylish and sophisticated, and it was a common part of social life. However, as time passed, scientists began to uncover just how dangerous secondhand smoke really was. It turns out that even if you weren't the one smoking, breathing in all that toxic air could seriously harm your health. Fast forward to today, and most public places have strict no-smoking rules. So now, if you want to enjoy a meal, you don't have to do it through a haze of cigarette smoke. If you opened up a newspaper in the 1950s and headed to the jobs section, you wouldn't just see listings for accountant or manager. You'd see wanted, male accountant, or now hiring, female secretary.
I see, Miss Barton, that you have some experience.
Yes, I was a year in the Trotmore Advertiser.
Employers had no qualms about specifying gender in job ads, reflecting the societal norms of the time. Back then, it was just how things were. Men were expected to handle the serious business roles, while women were often funneled into secretarial or nursing positions. However, there were also voices advocating for change, laying the groundwork for future movements. Fast forward to today, and that kind of hiring practice would likely lead to serious legal consequences. Thanks to equal employment laws, job ads can't dictate who should apply based on gender. Now, your skills and experience matter more than whether you wear a tie or a skirt. Imagine walking into a diner in the 1950s and being told you couldn't sit at the counter just because of the color of your skin, or stepping onto a bus and being forced to sit in a separate section. Sounds outrageous, right? Well, back then, this was legal in many parts of the U.S.
Completely different thing to see a 9-year-old hosed down, and really a 9-year-old.
Racial segregation was the law, meaning people of different races had separate schools, bathrooms, restaurants, you name it. It wasn't just unfair, it was deeply embedded in the system. However, the civil rights movement emerged as a powerful pushback against this discrimination, led by brave activists who refused to accept segregation as just the way things are. Through protests, court battles, and sheer determination, they worked tirelessly to dismantle segregation laws. Today, racial segregation is illegal, but the fight for true equality continues. Imagine falling in love with someone, only to be told by the government that your relationship is illegal. Sounds crazy, right? But in the 1950s, that was the harsh reality for interracial couples in many U.S. states. If a black person and a white person, or any two people of different races, wanted to get married, they could face arrest, fines, or other legal repercussions.
Sort of, when we're next to each other, particularly when photographers are trying to photograph, we sort of suddenly get conscious of the black and the whiteness of it. But
Some couples even had to leave their home states just to be together. It wasn't until 1967, thanks to the landmark Supreme Court case Loving v. Virginia, that these discriminatory laws were struck down for good. The case was led by Richard and Mildred Loving, a couple who simply wanted to marry in peace. Fast forward to today, and interracial marriages are not only legal, but also celebrated. Love, thankfully, won that battle. In the 1950s, seeing kids working tough jobs wasn't just normal, it was expected in many families. Imagine a 10-year-old spending long hours in a dusty factory, a dangerous mine, or out in the fields, doing work meant for adults. Back then, child labor laws technically existed, but let's be honest, enforcement was often lacking. Many families relied on their kids to bring in extra money, so children frequently had no choice but to trade playtime for grueling shifts. Fast forward to today, and things have changed dramatically. Laws are now much stricter, ensuring that kids focus on school instead of punching a time clock. While chores and part-time jobs still exist, the days of children working in hazardous conditions for long hours are largely behind us. Now, childhood is about learning, growing, and, most importantly, being a kid. In the 1950s, DDT was celebrated as the superhero of pesticides, sprayed everywhere to keep pesky insects at bay.
Now, this doesn't mean, of course, that we must never interfere, that we must not attempt to.
Farmers drenched their crops, homeowners used it like air freshener, and public health campaigns promoted it to combat mosquito-borne diseases. Many viewed it as a magic solution, though some scientists raised early concerns. Advertisements even showed families dining happily under a DDT cloud. However, scientists later discovered that DDT harmed not just bugs, but also birds, fish, and humans. Studies linked it to serious health issues, and its environmental impact was devastating. By the 1970s, many countries began banning it, highlighting how something once deemed safe was actually dangerous. Imagine this. It's the 1950s, and you hop into a friend's car for a road trip. Instead of a soda, they hand you an ice-cold beer while driving. Back then, it was common for people to sip cocktails or chug beers behind the wheel, with some even having mini bars in their cars for on-the-go refreshment. Sounds wild, right? However, as accidents increased, people began to realize that mixing booze and driving was dangerous.
Catch us, yo. Man, I make this shit go, man. Shit ain't got, yo. All right, y'all motherfuckers want me to make this shit go? Go, motherfucker, don't
Too many crashes and lives lost led to a growing awareness of these risks. This prompted the introduction of open container laws, making it illegal to have an open bottle of alcohol in a moving vehicle, with serious penalties today. Picture this. It's the 1950s and factories operate like giant metal beasts, spewing thick black smoke and dumping waste into rivers as if they were trash cans. While many were indifferent, some early advocates raised concerns. The air reeked of burnt chemicals, and rivers changed colors based on factory waste.
Pampers, diapers. It's very gross. Every day, yeah.
The prevailing belief was that nature would take care of itself. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Fast forward to the 1960s and 1970s. People began realizing that breathing toxic fumes and drinking polluted water wasn't healthy. This sparked the environmental movement, leading to laws against reckless pollution. Today, dumping waste or emitting unfiltered smoke is illegal, showcasing how scientific awareness and public advocacy can drive meaningful change. Advertisements in the 1950s resembled the Wild West. Companies made bold claims with minimal oversight. Want a soda that promises to make you taller? Sure. A cigarette brand that's doctor recommended? Why not? Miracle pills guaranteeing weight loss without diet or exercise? Just take their word for it.
Lively, lifty Coca-Cola provides a welcome bit of quick energy between meals. Makes for a pleasant pause.
Few rules prevented advertisers from stretching the truth or fabricating claims. Outrageous promises were common, and consumers often believed them without question due to the lack of strict oversight. Today, advertising regulations are much stricter. Government agencies like the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, ensure companies provide truthful information. So while ads remain persuasive, they can't make wild promises without proof. Imagine showing up to work in the 1950s. No hard hats, no safety goggles, and minimal rules to keep you from getting hurt. Back then, workplace safety was more of a suggestion than a requirement. Factories, construction sites, and mines were often danger zones, with workers exposed to hazardous chemicals, heavy machinery, and risky conditions without much protection. Accidents were common, and many were simply brushed off as part of the job. Fast forward to today, and thanks to organizations like OSHA,
plus benefits above and beyond that. Exactly, and the progression through the apprenticeship has a structured pay increase.
Strict safety laws ensure that workers have the right gear, proper training, and safer environments. Now, instead of dodging falling debris or inhaling toxic fumes, employees can focus on their jobs without constantly risking life and limb. What was once accepted as normal has transformed into a commitment to safety, and for good reason. Back in the 1950s, if you were the wrong race, religion, or ethnicity, finding a place to buy or rent in certain neighborhoods could be nearly impossible. Landlords and banks often denied housing opportunities based solely on a person's background, a practice known as redlining. This discriminatory practice was perfectly legal and painfully common, leading to entire communities built on exclusion, with minority families pushed into less desirable areas.
Well, you either see things his way or you're out of line.
Well, the minute those people showed up,
Thankfully, the Fair Housing Act of 1968 changed the game, making it illegal to deny someone a home based on their race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Today, while housing discrimination hasn't vanished entirely, the law at least provides everyone a fair shot at finding a place to call home. No explicit whites-only rules allowed. In the 1950s, drug ads were often like the Wild West, big, bold, and frequently exaggerated. Pharmaceutical companies could make just about any claim about their products, and oversight was minimal. Got a headache? This pill will make you feel like a superhero.
Well, I told you about it 6 months ago. We were only waiting till we could find a place to live.
6 months ago.
Feeling tired? Just take this magic tonic. There were few strict rules, no disclaimers, and definitely no mention of side effects. It wasn't until later that government stepped in, enforcing stricter regulations to protect consumers from misleading claims. Today, drug ads come with a lengthy list of side effects, and companies must provide evidence that their medications actually work. But back then, if a company claimed their pill could make you taller, smarter, and cure every ache and pain, many people were inclined to believe it. Imagine getting fired just for saying "I do." It may sound ridiculous today, but in the 1950s, it was a harsh reality for many women. Numerous companies enforced marriage bars, which meant that after tying the knot,
we don't know how far apart we are there. That's right. When you two met, there was probably an early physical reaction.
Women were often expected to resign from their jobs. This practice was especially common in teaching and office roles, where employers believed that married women belonged at home, not behind a desk. The prevailing attitude was that they were taking jobs from men or single women. Thankfully, times changed, and so did the laws. Today, married women can pursue their careers without worrying about an unfair pink slip just because they decided to get married. Picture this. It's the 1950s, and a group of friends hangs out at the park, drinks in hand, laughing and enjoying themselves. No one minds when someone gets tipsy and sings off-key. Public drinking, and even drunkenness, was simply part of life. People could stumble out of bars, sit on park benches with bottles, or bring flasks to baseball games without concern.
Now, Silv again, let's let the kids talk for a second. Hey, you guys know how I said we couldn't have booze? Well, I brought some.
Police intervened only if things got out of hand, as a little wobbling and slurred speech weren't major issues. Fast forward to today, and that casual attitude has changed. Now, being visibly drunk in public can lead to fines, arrests, or rehab referrals reflecting society's tightened rules for safety. Imagine a time when kids would bolt out the front door in the morning, hop on their bikes, and disappear into the neighborhood without a care in the world. No cell phones, no constant check-ins, just a vague promise to be back by dinner time. That was childhood in the 1950s. Parents weren't hovering, and nobody thought twice about it. Kids explored forests, climbed trees, and built forts, often miles away from home. Fast forward to today, and things look a lot different.
Go to the playground first.
Letting young kids roam unsupervised isn't just uncommon, it's become quite rare. With safety concerns, busier streets, and changing social norms, parents now keep a much closer watch. GPS trackers, scheduled playdates, and stranger danger talks are the new normal. While kids still have fun, their adventures are often planned and monitored, reflecting a shift in priorities where safety and peace of mind take precedence over the nostalgic freedom of the past. Back in the 1950s, riding in a car was often like lounging on a rolling living room sofa. No seat belts, no car seats, just a sense of freedom and a lot of wishful thinking. Kids weren't just passengers, they were mini daredevils, tumbling around the back seat, napping on the floor, or even perching up front like tiny co-pilots.
Making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size.
Road trips felt like a wild adventure on wheels. Car companies didn't even have to install seat belts until 1960, so most folks didn't think twice about skipping them. It wasn't until after too many crashes and serious research that people realized seatbelts weren't just a suggestion, they were lifesavers. Today, not buckling up can lead to fines, and letting kids roam free in a moving car, that's a one-way ticket to trouble. Back in the mid-20th century, smoking was incredibly common, with parents puffing away in the car, at the dinner table.
Now, if the federal trade decision has made you wonder about the contents of your cigarette,
and even while rocking babies to sleep, often without a second thought. However, as science advanced, we began to understand that secondhand smoke acts like an invisible villain, sneaking into kids' lungs and causing a range of health problems. Fast forward to today, and lighting up near children is a big no-no. We now treat fresh air like gold, prioritizing clean and healthy environments for little lungs. Imagine opening a newspaper in the 1950s and seeing job ads split into two sections, one for men and one for women. Want to be an engineer? Sorry, that's in the men only column. A secretary? Perfect, but only if you're a woman.
Morning paper, Morning Star. Paper, mister?
Back then, certain jobs were strictly designated as his or hers, reinforcing the idea that men belonged in offices and factories, while women were often funneled into roles like secretaries or homemakers. Fast forward to today, and that kind of discrimination is illegal in most places. Now, job listings focus on skills and qualifications, giving everyone a fair shot at their desired career. It's wild to think that just a few decades ago, your career path could have been determined by your gender instead of your talent. We've come a long way, and honestly, thank goodness for that. It's the 1950s, and you're at a party with friends, a cold beer in hand, feeling on top of the world. At 18, you're officially an adult, and in many states, that means you can drink legally. While it was more common for young adults to enjoy a night out and celebrate their newfound freedom, attitudes toward drinking varied widely across different communities. Fast forward to today, and the legal drinking age is now 21 in the U.S.
Quiet, empty your pockets!
So you don't understand.
Empty your pockets, lad! Disgusting.
Making it illegal for those underage to drink. This shift came in response to growing concerns about alcohol-related accidents and health issues among younger drinkers. What was meant once more accessible for 18-year-olds is now a privilege reserved for those a few years older, reflecting significant changes in societal norms over the decades.